boat is sinking, there's no sea left for me. And how the sky gets heavy when you are underneath it. Oh, I want to sail away from here. And God, He came down, 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 down,
I will
and
turn it over to Mike. Go for it.
All right, thanks, Ben. All right, well, I kind of take off with what Laura did last week. She went kind of chronological, which I kind of got a kick out of. So I live in Michigan now. This is where I was born. My earliest memory, I got a lot of trauma in like my past and when I was a kid and everything. So if anybody's triggered by anything like that, just kind of be fair warned. When I was 3 years old, my very first memory I have is my high school here used to have a swimming pool, and my aunts took me over there to give my mom a break because we just had another kid, and I vividly remember falling into the deep end, and then I remember struggling. Like I can remember my whole thought process was, I remember my dad telling me if I kick my feet, I could get back up to the surface where I can get a breath. And I remember kicking and kicking and kicking, and I could remember seeing a bunch of people swimming around me, like, you know, farther away and everything, and then just went to black. And I woke up with the lifeguard like pounding on my chest type of a thing. So that was when I was 3, and that's the first memory. All my memories that I have growing up, like I came from, you know, normal family, you know, at 3, I'm the oldest of 3, and you know, we had a lot of good times, you know, like we went to Disney World and we got to do some traveling and all that stuff. But I always remember like the bad things. Like I never remember the good times. When I was 5 or 6, we had a neighbor. She would babysit us, and I remember like she like sexually assaulted me. I know for sure, and I always felt bad about that until recently, because she was a girl and I was a guy, and it's you know, I was supposed to like that thing. You know, it was supposed to be rewarding for guys. Was the way that it was, you know, kind of presented to me back then. But it's not that way anymore. You know, it was wrong. It probably shaped me, you know, just like drowning kind of shaped me, because I remember when it happened, it was the first time like I felt like the center of something, because I always remember when I was drowning, the biggest thing was that I was forgot. I remember being underneath the water saying I was forgotten, that no one could hear me, no one could see me, you know, I was forgotten. But then, you know, when that happened when I was 5, I remember I was being, somebody actually, took a notice in me type of a thing. So that only happened, you know, a few times that I can remember. And then as I got older, we kind of moved into the same town, you know, same school. Coincidentally, the high school filled in the swimming pool with cement the summer after I drowned, because there was another kid that ended up having the same thing. So 2 was enough. And then I didn't really start drinking. Drinking's my big thing. So I started drinking when I think I had my first drink when I was 12, and it was up in Michigan. You know, a lot of like Midwest, we do a lot of like deer camp things where we go up for hunting. And I always thought that was real cool to go up. We could go up when we turned 12. That was the thing. And I didn't realize it at the time, but nobody brought guns up and nobody got licensed. It was all like one big party, one big drink fest. And my uncle took me to the liquor store and got a bottle, asked me, you know, what I wanted, and I got a bottle of Pucker. And I remember I drank a little bit of it, but then I hid the other, what was left of it, most of it actually. I hid the rest of it so that I could have it because I didn't know where I would get the next. So even that young, I was already starting to plan it out and think when I was going to get my next, my next drink on. After that, I didn't really center myself around drinking. I was never in high school and stuff. I didn't go out to parties much. I was always nervous about getting caught. I was a decent athlete coming up to my junior and senior year, where I had a couple offers to play football at some smaller schools up here in Michigan. And my senior year of track, I was running a relay, and I tore my calf muscle and ended up having to go pretty bad into rehab for that. And that shot down my my football, college career, getting college and everything paid for. And the night that I graduated high school, I had two friends over to the basement. We were doing the basement drinking because that was cool with my parents. As long as it was just a couple of us and no one was driving, we could drink whatever we wanted to in the basement after we graduated. So I remember we were getting real, good and drunk that night, and another kid ended up coming over, and I traded him 2 of my dad's Coors Lights for a blunt, and that was my first time I had pot. And after that, I went to, in 2 years, I went to 4 different universities for the average of a semester and a half, but some of them were just a couple of weeks because I would get there. I would find who would either get me booze or who would get me pot. And after I found who that was, I would help them sell it, or I would figure out how I could get it too. And I would stop, I would sign up for full classes, and then I would just completely stop going because I would either be drunk or stoned from the minute I get up to the minute I, went to bed or passed out that night. Everybody, the one college where I actually made, decent friends with that I still talk to a few of them, they all kind of saw something coming, and they all said that I would probably going to need a new liver before I turned 30 if I kept drinking the way I was. And, when you're only 20 and you hear that, you think, I'm just a kid. They're pretty right. It was getting close. But that that college was down by Detroit. So we would go into this goth kid. He was the one, he lived down there, so he knew the hookups. So we would go into the city of Detroit, bad city. We'd pick up tons of pot and everything down there. And this one time they gave us some pills to try. They called them uppers or whatever they were. So we, tried those, a few times. It wasn't too bad. I felt like I could stay awake for a long time, and that helped me drink because everything comes back to drinking for me. I have it didn't matter what it was, pot, anything else. It was just to enhance my drinking. I would smoke pot because it would relax me and it would stop the nausea, and I would just drink more. After I failed out of my 4th university, I moved home. It kind of all kind of worked out. It was the summertime. So I moved home and got a job where I was traveling for a company, and we were selling, we go to boat shows and different things. We would sell mooring systems, and I was really good at it because I could take these people out, spend the money, and it was expensive stuff, and they would buy it. I remember my buddy, the guy that owned it, I knew him through forever, and we actually were selling it. We went down to South Carolina to the Naval Training Base, and we sold it to them, our systems for their Navy training subs and everything, and it was pretty cool. I actually got to stay sober for 2 weeks when I was there because they would test us every single time we went into there to make sure we weren't high, we weren't drunk, anything like that, because we were going into, some secure areas and that. I remember the feeling of getting sober and being clean then for 2 weeks, I never thought I had a problem or anything. But I got so anxious that I couldn't fly home because I was in my own head about like the plane's going to crash. I have to be in control type of a thing. I ended up getting drunk at the airport, and the guy I was down there with, he ended up staying with us. We got another hotel room for the night, got up, drank, and I could fly perfect. And I was like, oh, well, there it is. That's all that I need. So then I would start drinking. I never got in trouble with the police just because consider myself kind of lucky. We made these things too in a little shop, and then we went out and sold them. And I would go home on my lunch, and I would pound like 3 beers. I'm not even 21 yet. I'm almost 21. And then I would drive back. And I remember the one time I was driving back, I rear-ended a guy. And I had an open beer in the car, and I remember putting it underneath my seat in my car trying to hide it. And the guy gets out, and he's like, well, my car's kind of a beater. Yours is a beater. Nothing's wrong with it. Just go on, watch what you're doing. So I really lucked out there. It kind of, I wouldn't say my drinking progressed quite yet to like blackouts yet. They came a lot later. Around when I was like 24, 25, I was like in the thick of it, like just horrible. I would drink just about every night to a blackout, get up and be able to muster through somehow. I was working at an emergency room, and I always use the excuse, like, if you had my job or if you had my life, you would drink like I did. Like, the emergency room that I worked at, I was the only person there that didn't have a family, like kids or anything, in the CAT scan department. And we would have to do like digital autopsies on kids suspected of child abuse and stuff. And I would always be the one that would be volunteered to do that because I didn't have kids, so they thought it was, I could handle it. And that was my big excuse when I got out at, 7:30 in the morning to hit up the bars, because it was nice. The bars opened at 7. And I used that. And then one night my grandfather died in the middle of the night one night. And my grandma, she was older, and she'd never even put gas in her car before. Like, he always did everything for her. They were of that generation. And she never wanted to get put in a home. So that was my big ticket where I could say, hey, look at me, the oldest grandchild. I'm going to go and move in with my grandma, take care of her, help her out. When really it was, she's got money. She's going to help me out with some shit. And I don't have to be responsible for myself. And that's the first time that those morning drinks became a habit. I would even, I would drink from, when I get out of work at the ER at 7 in the morning, but even on my days off when I would sleep, like a normal night, I would get up and I would starting to get the shakes and starting to get real sick. And, but still never thought I had an issue with it. And it wasn't, I met my wife, well, my soon-to-be wife. We went to high school together. Well, I went with her younger brother, so we kind of knew each other a little bit. So I met her a year before my grandma died, so I ended up taking care of my grandma for 3 years. And then the last year, I kind of split time between there and where my now wife was living. And it was like 2 separate lives. When I was living with my grandma, I was just drunk the whole time. Like, parents would stop by every once in a while, and I would give them the whole guilt trip. Well, you'd be drunk too if you had to sleep in the bed where, my grandpa died, and you'd be drunk too if you had to live here with her while she's battling dementia and this, and you guys live 2 blocks away and you show up, every other week. Like, I would just play that violin, that woe is me song, just so that I could fuel that ego of, well, I deserve this. No one knows how good they have it, but if they had this, And then I would go and, spend a weekend or something at a girlfriend's house, and we would go out, maybe have one drink, and I would be fine. So I would always tell myself, well, if I can do it then, I can, slowly stop. But I could never stop. I was 24 when my doctor first told me I should stop drinking because my liver enzymes were so high. I didn't get sober until I was 30, almost 30. So it never set in. My wife ended up getting a job out in Pennsylvania. I stayed in Michigan while we sold the house that she lived in. Out there, it was just a giant shit show when she was gone. I would work at this little bar, and just enough because I didn't have to pay any bills because she was, it was her house. I was just staying there for it to sell. I would work at this little bar just enough to get at least 7 handles, on a week, because I would go through them like daily. And I would steal like from the bar. I would steal from the till. I had keys to the place and everything. And I would just get so drunk, and my family would say, well, we're going to meet in this town, so come on over. And I'd say, yeah, I'll meet you guys there. And then that day would come, and, they'd be banging on the door to get in because I was passed out in the bathroom, just throwing up, covered in puke, just everything was everywhere. But still, I still went another 4 years, got out to Pennsylvania. We work in the veterinary field, both my wife and I. So I'm very blessed that I never went over the edge and stole any like controlled substances because, we deal with everything. I don't know if I'm blessed or if I was just that scared of it because I knew how bad of an addictive personality I was. I was really scared of hard stuff. I thought alcohol was no big deal. But I was scared to death because I knew if I had something that I liked, I would go until it killed me or until I was left with nothing. When we got out to Pennsylvania, I didn't know anybody, so I went to the weekend bender drinking because I ended up working with my wife for the first time. So Friday night came, and I would have 2 drinks on the way home, and then I would not know. We called it my time travel. I would boom, clock out on Friday night. I would open up a bottle, step into my time machine, and then boom, it was Sunday night at 9 o'clock, and I would stop drinking, not knowing what was going on. And that happened a lot. She ended up getting pregnant, and we had my first son. And I thought that things would change. I thought, hey, I got a kid now. I got to be responsible. I got to do the right thing. It's not just all about me. But even thinking that, I could not change. Babies were great because he took a lot of naps. So I would be the guy that got up with him at 3 o'clock in the morning to give him the bottle because I would let her sleep because I was such a good guy. He would have a bottle. I would have 3 or 4 drinks. Then we would both pass out. He'd wake up again at 9. I'd get up with him. Same thing, just, over and over and over. And, we were having serious conversations about, because we had different days off so that one of us would, so we would save money on daycare. We were having serious conversations about putting him in daycare when I was off because, I couldn't be trusted necessarily with him because there were times where, I don't know how long he was crying in his crib that I was passed out for. But still, I kept going and going. And it wasn't until beginning of March. He was born March 28th, and it was March 6th of the year going up to his first birthday that I was in one of my blackouts, one of my weekend blackouts, and it was the Sunday, and I don't remember any of this. She had to explain it to me on the next day, but she had fallen down the stairs with him, carrying him upstairs, and no one was hurt. They weren't hurt or anything. But I woke up the next day to get ready for work, and I came downstairs, and the island's pushed all the way up against like the back door at her house, and I didn't know what was going on. And she explained to me that I heard them fall. I came running in, fell down into the island, smashed it into the wall, came over and checked up on them and made sure they were all okay. Like I was really caring. So apparently in the blackout, at least I'm a nice guy. But that scared me enough to the point of I needed something to change. I didn't do it that Monday, but that Tuesday, when I finally had a clear head, I remember we both had that Tuesday off, and we were going to see marriage counseling and things like that. Like we thought, we were the issue, not me and my addictive behavior. And I remember waking up at 6 o'clock, and I Googled treatment centers, and I found this place up in Northeast Pennsylvania that was, 20 minutes away from my where we were living. And she went to take a shower, and I called them and got in that day at noon. So that was the hardest thing I ever do. Was she came out of the shower, and I broke down and said, I can't do this anymore. I don't know how else to do this without finding someone that knows. Like I didn't know anything about AA. I didn't know anything about I did nothing about nothing. I just knew that I couldn't handle it anymore, and I needed some type of guidance, some way to stop. So I checked in that day on it was March 7th that I checked in, and without knowing, I remember walking into the detox, and if anybody's been there, they go through the questions. What have you used? When's the last you used? This and that, and then they put me back out into the little gathering area, and she's sitting there with my 11-month-old son. And she's just bawling her eyes out. And I'm thinking, well, me, selfish me, what's wrong? I'm doing this so that we can be better. She's like, no, you're going to be here for at least 28 days. You're going to miss his first birthday. And that was when it finally hit me like, damn, I really fucked up. And not that I did fuck up, but I didn't realize that I was going to be missing that. So that kind of weighed on me a little bit, and I thought about, well, maybe I can go home, try this on my own type thing. I ended up staying. Rehab's rehab. If you've been to one, you've probably been to them all. This one was a decent one, but my insurance ended up cutting out after 21 days, so I got out on the 26th or something, so 2 days before his birthday. So I actually got to go, be there for his first birthday. But that's when my life changed huge. I couldn't do it half-ass. I jumped in to what they taught me. Like the rehab got me clean and everything, and I'm a big AA got me real sober and taught me how to live again. I jumped in both feet. I got discharged on a Sunday, and they discharged you at 8 o'clock, so you're out of there for the day. And I stayed until 5 o'clock that Sunday and went through everything like I was still there. She came and picked me up, and before I even went home and saw my kid, I asked her to drop me off because there was a 6 o'clock meeting, AA meeting. So I got that done and did that. The 90 and 90, I did 89 of 90 meetings in the 90 days. The one that I missed was my wife. She got pregnant after I got out of rehab, and one day at work she wasn't feeling good, so we went to the emergency room, and she was having a miscarriage with the baby. And so then I missed the meeting that night, but I ended up getting online and finding a talk group type thing. I counted that as I still did a meeting. A lot of positive things happened to me after I got drinking, after I quit drinking, but they happened through me kind of backhanded. When she was having that miscarriage, we were still out in Pennsylvania, and we go, when we moved out there, we had no family. All of our family was in Michigan. So we're 12 hours away from anybody. Nobody even came out when I was in rehab. Her mom and dad came out for a weekend to help her. But she was having that miscarriage, and it was just her and I. And I remember we go to the hospital the next day because she has to have surgery for it. And we're sitting waiting and waiting and waiting. And it was 8 hours after her scheduled time where we finally got in. And we saw 4 different doctors. And the fourth one he walked in, he's like, I know you from somewhere. And this guy's from Uganda. He's got this huge accent. I'm like, there's no way, I'm from Michigan. I'm not even from around here. And he's like, well, where are you from in Michigan? I was like, just little town Saginaw. I mean, you probably never heard of that. And he's like, oh no, I know Saginaw. And, we started talking, and he did his residency program in the same ER that I worked at. And him and I, we hung out a few times. I couldn't remember him very well, but he remembered me. And she was having just such an emotional time. Like, she was having a really, really hard time with it all. Because I think she blamed herself for that first one. She told me afterwards, she was worried about what life she was bringing this baby into, because I just got out of a treatment center and this and that. And he saw how bad she was having it. And he threw me a pair of scrubs, and he's like, hey, you're observing me today. So I got to hold her hand through like the whole thing and be that first face, which was really comforting, because the first thing she did when she woke up was like, how's my baby? Knowing that she's having a miscarriage and it's not going to be good. But instead of having a stranger there for her to say that to, it was me. And the only reason why I was there for it was because I got sober. And I continued to be sober through that. In my first year of sobriety, she had 2 miscarriages. In my second year, she had another one. And then we finally had, then we finally got pregnant, and we have our second son that was born last June. And we moved home a year ago, this past March, back to Michigan to be closer to our family and stuff. And the whole 8 years we were out in Pennsylvania, didn't miss any funerals, nothing. We moved back here, and this year alone, I've been to, I think, 5 funerals. And we moved back to be closer to my family. And the one family member who never left me, when I was doing my 90 at 90, she would call me every Friday, was my aunt. She would call me every Friday night when I was leaving a meeting. She'd say, well, how many did you go to? Is it really like the TV shows? You guys all really stand up and hold your hands? She just wanted to know everything about what it was. She was all into it. She was never a drinker or nothing. And she ended up getting liver cancer, and she was going through treatment and everything. And when we moved out here in March, she ended up, we moved out here in December, bought a house in March, and then she died the end of March, the first year we moved back. And had I been drinking, I wouldn't have been able to live through miscarriages, she was like a mother to me, and I would not have been able to be a part of that. She was on home hospice because it was getting real bad. And I got to do the night shift so that her kids and her husband could get some rest. So they would be with her all day, and then I would work, and I would go over to her house at night, and there's bottles of booze everywhere, and I could have easily drank, and I never wanted to, but I was there for her when she needed it most. And I say that kind of lightheartedly because it wasn't a big deal that I was doing it at the time, but had I been drinking, I would have turned that around like I did taking care of my grandma. I would have turned that around and said, well, hell yeah, I'm going to drink right now. I got 3 years sober in this past March, and a lot of it I contribute to the first 2 years was all AA. I was huge in AA, did all my steps and stuff. I moved back home, and it took me almost a whole year to find a home group that, because I was comparing everything to what I had out there. But Dopey got me through it. I remember I first heard, the first generation of This American Life. I heard it out with Dopey. I heard that in the parking lot of a grocery store right when my aunt was getting into hospice and stuff. And I was really thinking about what's it all worth and everything. And that came on, and it just, it spoke to me. And then I started listening and all that. But since this past year has been kind of a whirlwind, we're pregnant again, and, this whole COVID thing. But I've been able to stay sober through it all, which is just amazing to me as someone who drank every day for no reason at all. For me to be able to stay sober through everything that I have, to be able to talk about it is huge. I never spoke about any of those traumas. I didn't even talk about we went to Disney World when we were 9, and I was, I got forgotten there again, and I was lost for an entire day in the park. Like, no one could find me. All I did was walk around crying for an entire day because I was lost in Disney World. My whole life I felt forgotten, until, as cheesy as it sounds, until I started going to AAA meetings, and then like I felt like these were my people. Like, these people understood what it was like to be just shit, felt like you were shit on your whole life, and all of a sudden you have to grow up and deal with it. And that's the big thing, is I think I grew up more in the last 3 years than I had the first 27 years or whatever it was from when I first, realized I had an issue. And it's not easy, but it is what it is. I probably rambled on quite a bit there, but I think that's it.
His eyelids closed shut, sat back in the chair clutching that cup. Girlfriend came in a couple hours later, said his name shook him, but he never got up. He never got up. Never got up. We live on the cusp of death, thinking that it won't be us. It won't be us. It won't be us. It won't be us. Nah, it won't be us.